Welcome to the second part of a series on IEP and special education law. My name is Jeff Gottlieb. I am a special education attorney located in Southern California. Welcome. For today's session, you do not need to take notes. In fact, the notes are on my website. You can go to my website at www.specialeducationattorneyatlaw.com. Again, that's www.specialeducationattorneyatlaw. When you go to the website, simply go to the tab titled IEP Prep Checklist. Click that tab, print out the materials there, and if you do have any problems printing out those materials, it's everything we're going over today, then simply give a call to my office and we'll help you out. My office number is 562-699-2412. I do want to make you aware that my practice is located in California, which means is that what I talk about here, some of the law may be applicable only to California. So if you have any questions about your particular jurisdiction, speak to an attorney in your jurisdiction, other state, or do some research on your own. Anyway, let's begin. The first thing you need to know about preparing for an IEP meeting, and what I mean about preparing for an IEP meeting, it's everything that you need to do before you go to the IEP meeting. You need a checklist. Here's the things you need to do. The first thing you need to do is make certain that the IEP meeting is scheduled at a mutually agreeable time and date. Most often the school districts will provide to you in writing a notice of the IEP meeting. When you receive that notice, it will have a date on it and it will have a time. Make certain that date and time is convenient to you and anyone else that you're bringing to the IEP meeting. So if it's not convenient, immediately notify the school district both verbally, over the phone, and in writing that the time will not work for you or the date will not work for you, and schedule a different time and date, whatever is appropriate. Second thing, again, this is a checklist, so I'm going to go through these items fairly fast. If there are assessments to be reviewed at the IEP meeting, you definitely want all those assessments before the IEP meeting. So what you need to do is you need to put into writing to the school district that you require all assessments to be provided to you before the IEP meeting. That gives you an opportunity to review what will be discussed at the IEP meeting in terms of new assessments. Now what you want to do is give the school district a certain amount of time in order to provide those assessments to you. So for example, if you have a speech therapy report that's going to be reviewed, let's say that the reports be provided to you 3 or 5 days before the meeting, whatever you feel comfortable in doing. The worst thing that can happen is that you go to an IEP meeting, there's assessments being reviewed, and you have not had the opportunity to review those assessments yourself. Another thing in preparation for the IEP meeting is you should have in your possession copies of all assessments, all IEPs, all report cards applicable to your son for all the preceding years. In California, by law, the school districts are required to give you the entire educational file, which will include the IEPs, the assessments, report cards, and other documentation within 5 working days of them receiving your notice. So if you have an IEP meeting coming up, or even if you don't, you should have these items in your possession anyway in order to be prepared for the IEP meeting. Now, why do you need all this information? Because quite often in going to an IEP meeting, you want to put forward certain proposals of things that you want. You may want a different placement. You may want a change in your placement. You may want new services. You may want changes to the frequency and duration of services. Well, in order to be effective at an IEP meeting, you need to come with facts. And where will those facts come from? Those facts will come from new assessments. It'll come from your own assessments. It'll come from IEPs in the past. It'll come from prior assessments. It'll come from notes made in report cards. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that you want to have an increase in the frequency of speech therapy. Well, you may go back to other assessments done in the past that have recommended a greater frequency and duration of speech and language services than is being provided now. Another example, you may want an aid, one-on-one aid for your child where an aid has not been provided already. If you go back through your prior assessments and IEPs, you may find that there are notes in there that your child has challenges focusing, needs prompting often. That is the data that you would use to put forward your proposal. You're advocating for your child to have, for example, one-to-one aid. So here's the first thing you need to do. When you get all of those materials together, you need to read them. That will refresh your memory. Next thing is you need to decide what is it that you want out of an IEP meeting. Then you go back to all those documents again and you find out what data, what information, be it test results, subjective information, objective information, is in all of that documentation that will support your position for additional services or changes in placement. Next thing, you need to be well organized before you go to an IEP meeting. And what I mean by well organized is that you should have binders set up so when you go to the IEP meeting and you need to present a document, you can easily get to it. The worst thing that a parent can do is go to an IEP meeting with literally a box of stuff, of IEPs, assessments, etc. It won't work effectively. You have to be like an attorney, act like an attorney when you go to these IEP meetings. So what I recommend you do is you get a binder, clip binder, and you put all of your IEPs together, chronological order. The most recent IEP on the top, the oldest IEP at the bottom. Do the same thing for assessments. Put all your assessments together. Your assessments will have the most recent assessment on top, your oldest assessment on the bottom. Then have a separate folder for report cards, and then have a separate folder for everything else. And that way, when you go to the IEP meeting, if you need to pull out a document to show to the IEP team, it's easily accessible. What I recommend you do in addition is you take one of those Post-its and you actually put it on the document that you need to pull out so you can easily find it. Again, today's session was about knowing how to be prepared for an IEP meeting. We went over in review that you should give proper notice to the school, you should that you'll be attending and when and what's appropriate for you in terms of timing to be at the IEP meeting. We talked about having assessments, newly prepared ones, in your possession, in your hands, literally days before the IEP meeting. We talked about identifying data and information in preparation for an IEP meeting in support of whatever you may be advocating in terms of placement and services. We talked about how to organize the data. One other thing I want to mention before we end this video is that to remind you, you have a right in California to tape the IEP meeting. However, what you need to do is if you're going to tape record the IEP meeting, you must give at least 24 hours prior notice in writing to the school district. I recommend you give that notice as soon as you receive notice of the IEP meeting. Anyway, I want to thank you very much for your participation in today's IEP video. I just want to remind you there will be one more video that we're going to be doing in relationship to preparing for an IEP meeting, and that will be IEP video YouTube number 3. Thank you very much and have a good day.